1968, France. The young American guy, Matthew, comes to Paris on an exchange program to study French. These days, the city is often robbed by left-wing student riots in support of the spread of communist ideas around the world. Matthew is very shy, so it is difficult for him to meet anyone here. He is a movie fan and knows most films by heart, so he spends all his free time in the cinema. Dissolving in a line of similar students, Matthew feels like he is part of the cultural revolution of his time. Before the next session, Matthew notices a beautiful girl chained to a fence. She catches Matthew's eye, asks for help, and he frees her and also learns the girl's name. Isabelle was not chained and wrapped herself in a chain to play a trick on the naive Matthew. He is glad that Isabelle does not experience difficulties in communication, because she knows the language from her English mother. The girl introduces Matthew to her twin brother, Theo, but the communication does not last long, because the police arrived at the cinema building to disperse the student demonstration. In the evening, the three of them walk through the streets of Paris and discuss cinema, remembering famous innovative directors. Matthew is delighted with this pastime and new interest in friends who also study the world of cinema in detail. The next day, Theo calls Matthew and suggests they have dinner at the twins' house. Arriving for a visit, Matthew sees a huge luxurious apartment with long corridors in which it is easy to get lost. He notices red flags on the walls and busts of Mao Zedong on the shelves. Matthew meets the twins' parents, and afterward they all sit down to dinner. The father, a famous writer, talks about how difficult it is sometimes to catch inspiration, when suddenly Matthew becomes distracted by Isabelle's lighter, constantly turning it in his hand. The father considers this disrespectful and asks why this piece of iron captivated the guy's mind. Matthew surprises the father with his thoughts and vision of the world around him, because each side of the lighter exactly fits the size of the square patterns of the tablecloth. It was this harmony of perfectionism that captured all of Matthew's attention. After dinner, the twins invite him to spend the night at their house, because it is already late. Isabelle kisses Matthew and goes to bed, and Theo shows the guest his room. At night, Matthew wakes up with the desire to go to the toilet, and looks for it among the confusing corridors of a large apartment, when he suddenly discovers Theo's bedroom. Matthew is confused because he sees the twins sleeping together and without clothes. In the morning, Matthew wakes up to Isabelle licking his eyes and smiling, and then showing him the heroine from the film, and demanding to guess the name of this film. The twins' strange habits continue to surprise Matthew, because in the morning in the bathroom, while he is talking to Isabelle, Theo unabashedly takes a shower behind them. The parents went to a neighboring country on vacation, so Theo suggests that Matthew pick up his things from the hotel and live with the twins for a month. Matthew likes this proposal, but asks if Isabelle agrees. Then the girl replies that it was her idea. Matthew moves in with the twins, and from that day on they spent almost all their time in the apartment, discussing films and arguing about tastes. Later, Isabelle comes up with the idea of repeating the scene of the famous film, where the main characters run through the Louvre, holding hands. She invites Matthew to take part in this and run faster than in the movie, ignoring the guards. Matthew understands that if he is caught for such, albeit a minor, violation of the law, he will face consequences, and probably deportation. Curiosity and adventurism win, so the three of them run through the entire Louvre, deftly dodging the guards. And in the evening, Isabelle announces Matthew is initiated into her and Theo's close circle of interests. The next day, Matthew finds beach photos of Isabelle, which fill him with admiration and arousal, when suddenly he hears someone's footsteps. Fearing being caught with photographs he took without permission, Matthew hides one of them in his underpants. Later, Isabelle demonstrates a dance with a mop from a famous movie and asks Theo to guess the name. Not knowing the answer, Theo loses the bet and is now obliged, according to the rules of the game, to fulfill Isabelle's wish. In the morning, she saw her brother masturbating in front of a portrait of her favorite actress, and now Isabelle demands to do the same in front of her. Matthew is almost no longer surprised by the lack of boundaries in the twins' unusual game, and calmly watches Theo masturbate. More and more questions arise in Matthew's head, but the answers to them hardly bother him anymore, because his growing love for Isabelle outweighs the strange antics of the twins. Matthew continues to spend time with them, and one evening Theo acts out the death of one of the characters, wanting to introduce a new player to the game. Theo asks Matthew what movie it was. He can't remember and loses, so Theo declares his wish. In his presence, Matthew must make love to Isabelle. Theo also chooses the place himself. The kitchen floor, in his opinion, is much better suited for this activity than a bed or sofa. Hearing all this, Matthew is overwhelmed with excitement and embarrassment, and Isabelle, meanwhile, takes off all her clothes without any hesitation. A blushing Matthew goes to the toilet and then tries to hide in a large apartment. But Theo quickly finds the guy and brings him to the kitchen. Isabelle gets angry at Matthew and asks if a thought of making love to her forces him go on the run. Isabelle takes off Matthew's pants and laughs because she finds a photo of herself there. Out of shame, Matthew faints, but the twins quickly revive him, and then Isabelle lies naked on the floor. She experiences intimacy with Matthew while Theo watches everything happen, sometimes distracted by cooking scrambled eggs. Afterward, Matthew discovers blood and realizes that Isabelle lost her virginity to him. As the days pass, Matthew and Isabelle increasingly are left alone to enjoy each other, leaving Theo unattended. Isabelle and Matthew confess their love for each other. Matthew thought that such a beautiful girl had already had sexual experience, and the timid American student would not be the first. Theo is happy for his sister and new friend, but not with all his heart. As a twin, he was used to being Isabelle's the one, until he pushed her into Matthew's arms. Hearing Isabelle's moans throughout the apartment, Theo becomes jealous of his sister to her new passion. Later, the three of them take a bath, discussing the latest acclaimed films about war and love, and Isabelle reminds Matthew how much he means to her. Having confessed her love, Isabelle demands the same from Matthew, but in the plural, not forgetting about Theo, because they are twins, which means they both need to be loved. Having heard these words from Matthew, Isabelle demands to prove it and offers a new bet: to shave all the hair in the guy's genital area. Matthew did not expect such an absurd challenge, so the immaturity and frivolity of the twins begins to anger him. He believes that Isabelle and Theo will never grow up if they continue their childish games. Life must one day separate them, at least for a short time, because spending time in bed and in the bath of brother and sister, according to Matthew, will not lead to anything good. He asks Isabelle in private what will happen if their parents find out about their games. Isabelle answers without any doubt that in this case she will commit suicide. Then Matthew wonders if Isabelle has been on a real date and invites her to spend the evening without her brother. Isabelle doesn't know what it is and happily agrees. They meet in a cafe and then go to the cinema, where Matthew buys tickets for the lover chairs. Previously, he only occupied the front seats closer to the screen, where real movie fans usually gather, but now he tells Isabelle that a guy and a girl on a date simply have to sit in the back and kiss, letting most of the movie pass their attention. Taking advantage of the absence of the couple in love, Theo meets with a classmate who has been waiting for his attention for a long time and invites her to his home. After the cinema, Isabelle and Matthew return to the apartment, where they see someone else's women's clothing. The door to Theo's room is closed, so the lovers go to Isabelle's room to continue their date. There, Matthew kisses her, when suddenly Theo and his classmate leave from the next room, which knocks Isabelle out of a romantic mood, and she begins to shout at Matthew to leave. Matthew leaves upset, and Isabelle, who has become hysterical with jealousy, begins knocking on Theo's room door and demanding that he let her in immediately. Later, Theo invites Matthew, as a film fan, to make a movie about the events that happen outside the window every day, namely student marches and protests. Matthew is flattered by this offer, but he is embarrassed by the absence of the main character and the dullness of the crowd, which shouts the same slogans and is driven by the same goal. Also, Matthew does not believe in the sincerity of Theo's experiences, because he has never participated in rallies or marches, but instead spends his days in a luxurious apartment, drinking vintage wine. A well-fed person will not understand a hungry person, and according to Matthew, Theo is exaggerating his involvement in the social crisis. Theo is not ready to admit that he is a conformist and indifferent to the popular movement, but he has nothing to say in his defense, so he suddenly begins to strangle Matthew. Isabelle comes into the room and invites the guys to go into the living room. There, she built a large tent out of sheets and sticks that could comfortably accommodate 3 people. Later, Isabelle falls asleep between her 2 beloved men. In the morning, the parents return from vacation ahead of schedule, because Isabelle called them a few days ago and said that they had run out of money for groceries. Parents see chaos and piles of garbage in all corners. In addition to a mountain of empty wine bottles, the parents also notice a tent in which the twins and Matthew are fast asleep without clothes. The father silently places the check in a visible place, and the parents quietly leave the apartment to continue their vacation. A few hours later, Isabelle wakes up and finds the check. She understands that her parents saw her and her brother, which means she has only one way out. Isabelle takes out a hose and attaches one end to the gas pipe and carries the other into the tent where the guys are sleeping. Isabelle does not ask them if they want to leave, but simply puts the hose next to her and also falls asleep. Some time later, unknown demonstrators suddenly break the apartment window with a stone and wake up the twins and Matthew. He smells gas and Theo says the street has rushed in on them. Theo takes this as a sign that they can no longer stay on the sidelines and hide in the apartment. They go downstairs, where they see young people protesting, towards whom a wall of police officers is approaching. Theo wants to help the demonstrators and is armed with a Molotov cocktail, which is distributed to everyone here. Matthew stops Theo and reminds him that violence breeds more violence, and he thought the twins were against such drastic decisions. Matthew tries to dissuade the twins, but to no avail. His words have no effect even on Isabelle, and, holding hands, the twins go to the barricades, leaving an upset Matthew behind. The first Molotov cocktails fly towards the police, and law enforcement officers immediately react, beating and arresting the demonstrators.